Welcome to the Monroe School District. We're excited to have you join us as new employees. During this portion of training, we will be learning about district's policies and procedures that are important for all new employees to know. During our conversation today, we will be discussing non-discrimination, bias awareness, harassment, prevention and intervention, safe and civil environments, and have time for discussion and a way to submit questions if you have questions regarding the materials that we are covering today. So in Monroe, all decisions and work that we do are formed around the three commitments that we have made to every student within our district. A few years ago, we brought our community together to determine what is it that we want to provide every student within the Monroe School District. And through that process, we came to settle on three commitments that we would make to every student in the Monroe School District: equitable access, powerful instruction, and high expectations. You will find these commitments the center of all of the work that we do here within the Monroe School District. So we're going to talk a little bit about affirmative action, non-discrimination, and bias awareness. The Monroe School District's non-discrimination statement reads that the Monroe School District does not discriminate on the basis of sex, race, creed, religion, color, national origin, age, honorably discharged veteran or military status, sexual orientation including gender expression or identity, the presence of any sensory, mental, or physical disability, or the use of a trained dog, guide, or service animal by a person with a disability in its programs and activities, and provides equal access to the Boy Scouts and other designated youth groups. I am currently the Title IX Coordinator and the Civil Rights Compliance Coordinator for Monroe School District. You can reach me in the Human Resources Office at any time. The Section 504 and ADA Coordinator for the district is David Parator. He also works out of the district office and can be reached by contacting his office in Student Services. Our district recognizes that an equal employment opportunity is an indicator of excellence in education. All employment practices must be administered to ensure a fair and equal treatment of all of our applicants and our employees that are applying for promotions or other positions within the district. It is our priority to employ individuals who represent diverse talents, contributions, and abilities, along with different experiences that they will share with our students and with their coworkers. It is important that each of us become aware of our own prejudices and our behaviors, including those which are unconscious or implicit. Biases can be both positive and negative. We do not have unconscious bias because of any fault. We have them because we're people. We have them because of the unique experiences that each of us have encountered within our own personal lives. To understand bias, we need to understand that implicit bias refers to attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, our decisions in an unconscious manner. These biases, which encompass both favorable and unfavorable assessments, are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or intentional control. They reside deep within our subconscious, and these biases are different from known biases. An explicit bias refers to attitudes or beliefs we have about a person or a group on a conscious level. Much of the time, these biases and their expression arise as a direct result of a perceived threat. We are going to take a minute here and we are going to watch a short video called Blind Spots. Please pay attention in this video because it has an opportunity to explain that all of us have blind spots or implicit bias that can be subconscious and we don't even know about it.
Are you seriously considering her as a candidate?
Just don't trust
She's a
her.
woman.
She's a woman.
This is a man's
She's
job.
clearly not educated.
Really not. Does she even speak English?
That's not me. I'm not like that. You call it an honest mistake. Science calls it a blind spot. Our unconscious mind is a mysterious and powerful thing. It makes 90% of our decisions without us even knowing it. Our brains are overloaded with 11 million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process about 40 of them. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts, using past experiences to make assumptions. And you know what happens when we assume. Our unconscious mind can put us on autopilot, determining where we sit, who we eat lunch with, who we turn to for advice, and who we choose to offer a helping hand. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. Same point of view, same decisions, same outcomes. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgments and misconceptions. We've all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots. Think about it. Who's talented? Who's able? Who can I trust? Who belongs? We've all been there. Blind spots are part of the human condition. Our choices have consequences for us and the people we interact with. By accepting that blind spots exist, we can stop. Imagine what possibilities exist if we could do it all over again. Different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse networks, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you, with unlimited potential. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what's possible.
Sexual harassment. Policy 3205 is our student policy, and policy 5011 is our employee policy. These policies work and direct that within the Monroe School District, all employees and students should be able to work and study in an environment free from all forms of discrimination, including sexual harassment. Sexual harassment means unwelcome conduct or communication of a sexual nature. Any employee who witnesses sexual harassment or receives a report, an informal complaint, or a written complaint about sexual harassment is responsible for informing the district's Title IX or Civil Rights Compliance Coordinator. All staff are also responsible for directing complaints to the formal complaint process. All forms of discrimination and harassment are specifically prohibited and will not be tolerated in the educational environment or workplace. Any employee or student who believes that they have been subjected to harassment, sexual harassment, or intimidation in the educational environment or on the job, either as a victim of or a witness to, is strongly encouraged to bring this to the immediate attention of their principal, their supervisor, or human resources. All complaints will be investigated promptly and fairly, and where appropriate, immediate corrective action will be taken. Failure to comply with district policies can lead to disciplinary actions up to and including termination. All students and employees have multiple levels of appeal rights as outlined within the full district policy and procedure. Examples of sexual harassment can be verbal, physical, or visual. Types of verbal possible examples could be sexual remarks, teasing, inappropriate jokes. Physical could include fondling, grabbing, pinching, hitting, kissing, and visual could include sexually explicit materials or pictures, lewd hand gestures, or sexual emails or other inappropriate electronic communications. Verbal actions can include things such as addressing a person with a term of affection, making sexual innuendos, turning work discussions to sexual topics, telling sexual jokes or stories, asking questions of a sexual nature, making comments about a person's body, their clothing, or their looks, or making kissing sounds, howling, or smacking lips. Nonverbal actions that could constitute sexual harassment include looking a person up and down, staring at someone, blocking a person's path, or restricting or hindering another person's movements, displaying sexually suggestive visuals, artifacts, or items, displaying sexual and/or derogatory comments about men or women on coffee mugs, hats, or clothing, making facial expressions such as winking or throwing kisses, or making sexual gestures with your hand or your body movements. The following acts may constitute actionable harassment if based on protected class: taunts, threats, or intimidation due to protected status, written or electronic communication that are derogatory or threatening via social media, email, text message, Instagram, Snapchat, any of those. Slang or language that has taken on a derogatory or negative meaning against a protected class. There are multiple ways to submit a concern. A concern can be submitted through an informal process or a formal process. An informal process would be a verbal process, and a formal process would be a written concern that is submitted to the district. Any written concern needs to be submitted to the district's compliance officer, who at this time is myself in Human Resources. Sometimes when we are talking with staff and discussing possibly a concern they have or a concern that was submitted by someone else on their behalf, staff will say things like, I don't want to make a big deal out of it, I just want it to go away. And we have to ask ourselves, there's a difference from not wanting to making a big deal out of it or reporting it to being afraid to. And so we are committed to an environment that is enjoyable, respectful, and professional for all of our employees and for all of our students. It is also important to know that it is the perception of the receiving individual, not the acting individual, that weighs most heavily in deciding if harassment has occurred. So it is the impact of the actions, not the motive, that matters the most. And even though sexual harassment may not have been the motive, if the receiving individual finds the behavior uncomfortable, embarrassing, or threatening, there is a problem and interventions are needed. There is a big difference between sexual harassment and someone flirting with another individual. When we talk about actions and feelings, when we're talking about flirting, those actions are usually mutual, flattering, a compliment, uplifting, desired, motivated by caring, and they are legal. Sexual harassment actions are one-sided, humiliating, a criticism, feel attacking, and are undesired, motivated by power, and are illegal. Flirting, receivers feel happy, flattered, in control, important, and attractive, and victims of sexual harassment feel angry, sad, powerless, ugly, and unimportant. Gender Inclusive Schools. District Policy 3211 provides each of our students the opportunity to attend school in a non-harassing or bullying or intimidating atmosphere for students. And federal and state law, along with district policy, affords all students and staff with protections against harassment. Students have further protections against harassment, intimidation, or bullying. The educational and work environment must be safe and free from discrimination for students and staff, regardless of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Protections are extended to educational records, protected information, restroom and locker room accessibility, sports and physical education, and unacceptable dress codes. Administrators must ensure protections are in place for all students and accommodations are made in a timely and efficient manner. Staff members will use the name and gender by which the student identifies unless legally required to do otherwise. Students should be identified by the pronoun of their choice. In any school activity, staff will make every effort to separate students based on factors other than gender where practicable. Students will be allowed to dress in any manner that is consistent with their gender identity and/or their gender expression within the constraints of the dress codes adopted at their school. School dress codes will be gender neutral and will not restrict a student's clothing choices on the basis of gender. All students will be allowed to use a restroom and locker room consistent with their gender identity and/or gender expression, or one which makes them feel comfortable. I am the district's primary contact for this district policy. If anyone has questions, please reach out to me in the Human Resources Office. We're now going to talk a little bit about harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Policy and Procedure 3207. The Monroe School District is committed to a safe and civil educational environment for all of our students, employees, volunteers, and patrons, free from harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Harassment refers to any malicious act which causes harm to a person's physical or mental well-being. It can be discriminatory harassment, malicious harassment, or sexual harassment. Intimidation refers to implied or overt threats of physical violence. And bullying refers to unwanted, aggressive behavior by another youth or group of youth that involves an observed or perceived power imbalance, is repeated multiple times, or is highly likely to be repeated. Bullying may inflict harm or distress on the targeted youth, including physical, psychological, social, or educational harm. Bullying can also occur through technology and is called electronic bullying or cyberbullying. So what is harassment, intimidation, and bullying? Under state law in the state of Washington, harassment, intimidation, or bullying means any intentional, electronic, written, verbal, or physical act, including but not limited to one shown to be motivated because of his or her perception of the victim's race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, or mental or physical or sensory handicap or other distinguishing characteristics when the electronic, written, verbal, or physical act physically harms a student or damages a student's property, or has the effect of substantially interfering with a student's education, or is so severe, persistent, or pervasive that it creates an intimidating or threatening educational environment, or has the effect of substantially disrupting the orderly operation of school. We need to recognize that behaviors that happen might fall under two different policies and procedures that need to be investigated under both of those policies and procedures. For instance, things possibly like a slur would need to be looked at and investigated under our discrimination policies and under our harassment, intimidation, and bullying policies. Each of these policies have different guidelines which need to be met and followed, and timelines. Harassment, intimidation, and bullying under Washington state law, there is a 5-day time frame with which investigations must be completed. Under discrimination policies, there's a 30-day timeline for investigations to be completed. So it is vitally important that all staff report any sort of harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discriminatory actions or behaviors that they see on an immediate basis. Every staff member must understand their responsibility to report instances of harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and to enter tickets into our Safe Schools Alert system to report such actions. Staff may be notified by students, parents, community members, or they may become aware of these behaviors through work situations. It is important to remember reports can be made verbally and need not be written. Reports can be made to Safe Schools Alert by submitting the information online, by text, by phone, or email. All reported incidents must be investigated and resolved within the timeline set by state law. Safe Schools Alert has an app available for both Android or iPhones from the appropriate app store on either of the services. Every staff member will recognize and intervene. All staff are required by law to report and intervene in instances of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. We are required to support targeted and offending students and to take appropriate actions. If a parent or guardian submits a form or otherwise informs the school, teacher, paraeducator, bus driver of a situation, assume that it is severe, persistent, and has not been resolved. Anyone who has questions regarding harassment, intimidation, and bullying policy, please direct those to my office, as I am the district's compliance coordinator for harassment, intimidation, and bullying for all students within our district. You can find my information on the district website and on OSPI. Prevention and intervention. It shouldn't hurt to be a child. Child abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Every employee of the Monroe School District is a mandatory reporter for her abuse, neglect, and exploitation of children. Under state law, the law requires that all professional school personnel, including substitutes, who have reasonable cause to believe that a student has suffered abuse or neglect, is required to report such incident or cause a report to be made to the proper law enforcement agency or to Child Protective Services. A report to Child Protective Services must take place as soon as possible, but absolutely within 48 hours. Please never tell a student that information they tell you will always be kept confidential. You are a mandatory reporter. Notify the school counselor and administrator if you have a need to submit a mandatory report, and you must complete the child abuse reporting form found on our staff hub. Child abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The definition of abuse now includes communication with a child for immoral purposes or viewing, possessing, or distributing any sexually explicit image of a child. We are also required to report child abuse, neglect, or exploitation on a student-to-student basis. If there is student-to-student abuse, neglect, or exploitation, it does trigger the mandatory reporting statute, and you are required to report to law enforcement or Child Protective Services. Failing to report any incident may result in criminal liability, regardless of whether it is determined the incident is provable in a subsequent legal proceeding. That criminal liability is personal criminal liability. Please remember that the Monroe School District does not investigate any situations regarding child abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Law enforcement or Child Protective Services will do any investigation that is needed. We are mandatory reporters, and as such, we will report information that we know or situations that we know, but we do not investigate them. Suicide prevention. The district has a comprehensive plan that addresses the emotional and behavioral distress, including suicidal thinking and behavior, self-harm, substance abuse, and violence for the students of our district. All employees are obligated to take appropriate steps to ensure the safety of our students. When a student is suspected of being depressed or is showing signs of self-harm and or thoughts of suicide, all staff are required to intervene on behalf of the student by initiating support and then promptly notifying the school administrator, counselor, or program manager of their concerns. Unfortunately, within the Monroe School District, we have lost students to suicide, and it is a traumatic event for the students and the staff at any school when we lose a young person. We want to do everything within our power to provide supports and help for every student, and this is a very important part of that process. And although students generally have a right to confidentiality and privacy, statements of self-harm or harm to others are always exceptions. Clearly tell students that you will need to share your concerns, including any relevant information disclosed by that student. Never promise a student that you can keep information secret that may jeopardize the safety of that student or another person. Anytime there's a concern of this nature, the administrator or program manager and counselor must be immediately notified. The administrator or counselor will notify the student's parents and intervene promptly. In all situations, the administrator must be informed of students being monitored for suicidal concerns. So what might be warning signs that a student could be having thoughts of self-harm? Some of the verbal things, warning signs that could be, as if a student were to say that no one would ever notice if they disappeared. It doesn't matter if they're here. Or the student can say, it's never going to get better. Nothing can make this better. Those are definitely comments that we would want to have further conversations with that student and try to provide them with supports. Behavioral things that you might see might be low energy, depressed mood, increased isolation, or self-injury. Situational things could include a remarkable decline in grades, real or perceived failure to meet expectations, or a significant loss in the life of that student. We must always remember our students are not adults, and they cannot process information the same as adults can. A significant loss in the life of a child is very, very difficult, as it is in the life of an adult. But we need to make sure we have, and we are exercising all of the supports that we have to help students when these types of situations arise. Intervention. We want to take action to help every struggling student, and it can make all the difference. Knowing that someone cares and that we'll be there with them can work wonders. And students might accept our help, and some more readily than others, but it's important that we try. Asking a student if they're thinking about suicide will not make them more likely to become suicidal. In fact, it will most likely make them feel safer that we are willing to talk about a very difficult topic. It will show students we care, and we can direct them to appropriate staff who can have conversations with students about self-harm, suicide, or harm to others. Please make sure that if you have a concern about a student, that you are notifying the building administrator and school counselor immediately. McKinney-Vento. This is the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. The definition of a homeless student are those who lack a regular, fixed, adequate nighttime residence. Examples of homelessness include couch surfing or sharing the housing of others, and that could be due to economic hardship, eviction, loss of housing, domestic violence, among many other factors. Living in motels, campgrounds, or substandard housing in someone's shed in their backyard that has no utilities. Sleeping or living in a public place not designed for that, or living on the street. Living in cars, abandoned buildings, or shelters, or other inadequate accommodations. The Unaccompanied Homeless Youth Act, also under McKinney-Vento, provides supports for youth who are not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. Many times these are students who have been kicked out of their homes for any reason, and they're just trying to make it on their own. We know that being homeless creates many barriers for our students and their educational pathways. We know that homelessness can cause high mobility, resulting in a lack of school stability and educational continuity. There are enrollment requirements that are difficult for homeless students to be able to meet. Many times there's a lack of transportation. Could be poor health, fatigue, and hunger. And prejudice and misunderstanding about homelessness is a very real obstacle and barrier that many of these students face. So what are some common signs of homelessness? Maybe it's a student who's attended many different schools. Could be poor health. Maybe the student is always hungry. May have poor attendance. They're always tardy. May have poor hygiene. Not be prepared for class. You may notice social and behavioral changes, or very vague comments about their current living situations. The effects of homelessness are many. 54% of children in homeless situations experience some form of developmental delay. They have lower scores on standardized tests, inconsistent and inadequate health and nutrition, higher absenteeism, which leads to overall lower academic achievement. They are less likely to participate in school activities, including sports, and more likely to get in trouble. Half as likely to graduate from high school, and twice as likely to repeat a grade. Students who are homeless have rights under federal law. They have the right to attend the school in the area where they're living, or the school of origin, or the school they were attending when they were last permanently housed. They have the right to immediate enrollment and assistance in collecting necessary documents and forms. They have the right to transportation to and from where they are living to their school, free breakfast and lunch, educational services such as special education, gifted education, English language instruction, reading, and math supports. They also have immediate enrollment into additional academic support services if needed. So how can we help? How can you help? You can recognize the signs of homelessness and report to your school point of contact or the district's McKinney-Vento liaison. You can adjust assignments so students not living in a permanent situation have the opportunity to complete them. Hold students accountable for what they control, their attitude, their behavior, not what is outside of their control. Students that are homeless may have no access to technology outside of school. If you are only asking students to do homework and assignments online, that may be impossible for a student who is in a homeless situation. That is unacceptable. Students that are homeless may not have all of the supplies other students have. We need to make sure that we are differentiating and making sure that these students are also successful. I would also challenge you never to take away a possessions of a child that we believe may be homeless. That little car that student is playing with and fidgeting with in their hands might be a distraction for the lesson that you are teaching at this moment. However, if you believe taking that possession away from the student is going to allow that student to engage in education, it is not. That student, that might be the only thing that student has left of what was their last permanent housing, or it might be the only thing they have left at all. That provides that student probably the only security they have. Now, setting that item where they can see it while they're finishing and paying attention to the work that you need done in the classroom is usually a win-win situation. But please always be looking and cognizant of all of the factors that our students bring with them and how we can support them to be successful on their educational journey through the Monroe School District. The district also has a policy for civility in the workplace. The district in its entirety is committed to the core value of mutual respect for each person, regardless of our individual differences and our characteristics. We expect this value to be manifested in the daily behavior of all of our constituents. Uncivil conduct on district property or district-sponsored activities by school district employees, parents, volunteers, contractors, or visitors is prohibited. The district expects that all interactions from staff will be professional and respectful at all times. Policy and Procedure 5253, Maintaining Professional Staff-to-Student Boundaries, is one of the most important policies and procedures that you read and understand. This is the policy and procedure that sets out examples for you and guidelines for you that will protect your professional work as an educator. The Monroe School District Board of Directors expects that all district staff will maintain the highest professional standards when they interact with students. District staff are required to maintain an atmosphere conducive to learning by consistently maintaining professional boundaries. The interactions and relationships between district staff and students should be based on mutual respect and trust and an understanding of the appropriate boundaries between adults and students in and outside of the educational setting and consistent with the educational mission of our district. Staff members are required to notify and discuss issues with their building administrator or supervisor whenever they suspect or question whether their own or another staff member's conduct is inappropriate or constitutes a violation of this policy. Staff are prohibited from inappropriate communications with students online or from engaging in any conduct on social networking websites that violates the law, district policies or procedures, or other generally recognized professional standards. A boundary invasion is an act or omission by a staff member that violates professional staff-to-student boundaries and has the potential to abuse that relationship. An inappropriate boundary invasion means an act, omission, or pattern of behavior by a staff member that does not have an educational purpose and results in abuse of the staff-to-student professional relationship. Examples of possible inappropriate boundary invasions by staff members include, but is not limited to, any type of inappropriate physical contact with a student and or other conduct that might be considered harassment or misconduct under state, or federal law or district policy or procedure. Singling out a particular student or group of students for personal attention or friendship. Socializing, where students are consuming alcohol, drugs, or tobacco. Encouraging students to confide their personal or family problems and or relationships. If a student initiates such a discussion with you, you are to refer that student to their counselor. Sending students on personal errands unrelated to any educational purpose, or giving a student a ride in your personal vehicle in a non-emergency situation. Disclosing your own personal, sexual, family, or employment concerns or other private matters to one or more students would be a boundary invasion. Exchanging personal gifts, cards, or letters with an individual student. Socializing or spending time with students outside of school-sponsored events. Soliciting phone, email, text messages, or other forms of written or electronic communication to students without the administrators or supervisors and parents' permission when the communication is unrelated to schoolwork or other legitimate school business. Being alone with an individual student out of the view of others. Inviting or allowing students to visit a staff member's home or visiting a student's home except as part of assigned professional duty. This is not an exhaustive list. If a staff member engages in such behaviors, there may be great cause for concern. But acceptable interactions with students require that we remain calm and in control of our emotions at all times. There will be times where things are very stressful within the classroom, on the school bus, on the playground, while you're coaching. Regardless of your position within the district, there will be times where things are chaotic and stressful. It is vitally important that you remain calm and in control of your emotions. Treat all students with respect. The use of profanity is never acceptable when interacting with the students of the Monroe School District. You must model appropriate behaviors. Never hit, kick, or push a student for any reason. Do not put your hands on students unless you have been CPI trained or there is an emergency. Do not contact a student via email or cell phone unless you have copied their parents on the interactions. Never be alone with the student unless the door is open or the windows are open for others to see into the room or classroom. Do not friend students on social media sites such as Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or any other social media site. Electronic resources and internet safety. Policy and Procedure 2022 outlines all of the standards with which the district has for electronic resources. Students and staff members need to be proficient and safe users of information, media, and technology to succeed in today's digital world. Information posted on the internet is public and permanent and can have a long-term impact on an individual's life and or career and on our students' lives and careers and ability to get into the college of their choice. The expectations for student and staff behavior online are no different from face-to-face interactions, where I explicitly explained earlier that all interactions are required to be professional and respectful. Students and staff are responsible for all activity on their account and must not share their account password. There is also no expectation of privacy. The district provides the network system, email, and internet access as a tool for education and research. The district reserves the right to monitor, inspect, copy, review, and store without any notification to staff all information on all accounts. All documents created by the Monroe School District are subject to the Public Records Disclosure Act. Personal use of the network only incidental personal use may be done using the district network, including the use of district email accounts. Use your district email account for your work and professional work, and use your personal account for personal business. Child Internet Protection Act and cyberbullying. The Internet is living space where life, society, civility, and global citizenship play out in real time. For all of this generates freedom, power, and responsibility. The biggest danger for young people online is other young people. And all students and staff must receive instruction on the appropriate online behavior and cyberbullying awareness. Staff members are required to report instances of cyberbullying that they become aware of. The Student User Privacy Educational Acts, or called the SUPER Act, is a requirement that we are vetting any online website or service that collects identifiable student information. All of these sites must be vetted through our technology department in order to ensure that they comply with many different laws regarding the privacy of student information. There is a list of vetted sites that is on our staff hub for staff members to access. If there is a new website that is not on that list that you would like to use with students, you must submit that first to the technology department for vetting, and they will then go through the process and then inform you if the site has been approved or not. Restraint and isolation. Policy and Procedure 3346. We know that there is no benefit to isolation or restraint for our students, and the use of non-emergency restraint or isolation poses a danger both to staff members and to students. The use of isolation and restraint is prohibited, except when the student's behavior poses an imminent likelihood of serious harm to the student or another person. This applies to all students. IEPs and 504 plans may not include the use of isolation or restraint as a planned behavior intervention unless guided by the WAC and supported by district administration. Any school employee who uses isolation or restraint on a student during school-sponsored instruction or activities must inform the building administrator or designee as soon as possible and within 2 business days submit a written report of the incident to the district office. Student supervision. Lack of proper supervision can result in loss of life and destruction of property, and the number one finding in school lawsuits and claims. Schools have a unique responsibility to maintain student care, custody, and control. Proper supervision is a major component in any decision a building administrator makes. Whether on campus or off, if the activity is school-sponsored, we must provide at least one staff member to oversee the activities. At least one adult must be there to enforce district policies and rules, provide guidance and direction, respond to emergency situations, and demonstrate good understanding of the risks and exposures the activity may present to students. Field Trip or Excursion Policy and Procedure 2320. Please read this policy and procedure if you plan to take any sort of a field trip with your students. You must complete all of the required documentation and provide for the correct amount of supervision and chaperones needed for any field trip for students. We must provide supervision on all field trips or athletic events, any school-sponsored dance, before or after school activity, and on the playground and in school hallways. Staff are required to provide general supervision at all times in order to see and hear what is happening in the area of any given activity. More specific supervision is needed for high-risk activities with younger and less experienced participants or children with special needs. All staff are expected to have a thorough understanding of the activity they are supervising in order to anticipate potentially dangerous situations and take prompt action to prevent accidents. If staff have questions or safety concerns, they should promptly consult the building principal. I want to wish you a wonderful year. As I stated in the beginning, we are so excited to welcome you to the Monroe School District. You have been chosen because of your unique talents and experiences to work with our students and enhance our staff within the district. If you have any questions regarding any of the material covered in this presentation, please contact my office at Human Resources, and I will be glad to provide additional information or clarification for any questions that you may have. Again, welcome and have a great year.